This episode of Literary Treks is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and to help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading, in case I got bored.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Literary Treks, your official Star Trek book and comics podcast here on the Trek FM network. And I'm so glad that I'm not doing this alone, because fresh from vacation is Dan Gunther. Hey, Dan, how was the vacation?
I'm a little crispy, a little sunburned, but really excited to be back and really excited to talk about some exciting Star Trek books and comics again.
Now I'm craving KFC, because when you said crispy, I thought of extra crispy chicken.
Well, I mean, I'm not far off. There's not 11 special herbs and spices on me, but I definitely did get cooked.
Well, speaking of cooked, Amy, have you been out in the sun? We got Amy Nelson with us.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I've had a fun summer and took my books to read while I was on vacation, sitting out on the beach, on the sand, getting in those sun.
So what books were you reading?
Some amazing TNG novels. Q something or another, I think it is.
Good
like
choice.
Q Zone?
Good choice.
Q Zone, yes, that's the one.
You know, I'm so glad you said that, because we're going to review Q Zone on this episode. So this all works out great that you're here, because now you can contribute to that review.
What a crazy random happenstance.
Yes, that is crazy. I'm so glad that you guys have me back. I just love being on your show and talking and getting my reading on. So it's good. Thank you, guys.
Your hair looks lighter. Is that from the sun?
It must be, because, I was in Mazatlan, Mexico, and in Oceanside, California. So, yeah.
Excellent. Very cool.
Yes.
I'm not...
And Dan, you were in Mexico.
I was in Puerto Vallarta, so, not that far away geographically. So,
right.
Very cool.
Wow, that's so funny. Earlier this week, I was in Texas.
Oh, there
now,
we go.
I know that's not Mexico, but they touch each other. So
there
I was
you
close.
go.
It's not Mexico, but it was.
I went to a Mexican restaurant. Does that count?
Well, I guess every restaurant I went to was by definition a Mexican restaurant.
Right.
No matter what they were serving, it's a Mexican restaurant because you're in Mexico,
Exactly.
right? I haven't thought about that. I could go to a Mexican restaurant in America and say it's an American restaurant, and people will argue with me. No, it's not. It's Mexican. I'm like, no, but it's in America. All right. So anyway, we're not here to talk about Mexican restaurants, even though I would love to do that for an hour because I love Mexican food. But we're, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to do the TNG novel Q Zone as part of our feature. And before that, we have our news. But also, I just want to mention that later in the episode, after we do the feature, we have an iTunes review and an email. And we're going to read those at the near the end of the episode. So, maybe, who knows, we'll get a review about our Mexican restaurant talk someday, and we'll read that here on the show. That should be exciting. And I'm looking forward to this coming week, because Amy and I are going to be at Star Trek Las Vegas.
So excited.
Everybody look for us because we're just looking to have a good time.
That's right.
Rub
Find
it in,
us at
guys.
the
Rub it in.
Masquerade Bar.
No, I'm excited for you guys. I really wish I could come this year, but darn it.
Just so you know, it wasn't for a lack of me trying to be persuasive, tying his arm behind his back, and he still said no. So maybe next year, Dan.
Maybe next year.
Okay.
For sure.
You're stronger than me, Dan, because Amy convinced me to come.
That's right.
To be fair, you guys don't have to leave your country to go. So, I mean, you know.
I don't even have to leave my city.
Oh, yeah. I mean, come on. There's no comparison.
That's true. That's true.
She expects everybody else to pay to get there, and she can just walk on over.
Right.
I'm going to challenge you to
Uber.
come to the Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo next year. That's what
Yes, I saw your YouTube thing, of course, and I'm definitely putting it on a to-do list.
It's pretty cool. It's funny because I made that video about, quote, small conventions, and then while I was making it, I was like, this is actually a pretty big convention at this point. But anyway,
Yeah.
Well,
Calgary
I have
Comic and
an aunt.
Entertainment Expo. You should go.
I have an aunt that lives in Calgary, so
Oh,
it
cool.
might
You've even
happen.
got a couch to crash on.
Exactly.
Oh, great. Now you guys are going to convince me to go to that. too.
Yes.
You totally should. It's great.
Hey, maybe we should move on to the news.
Okay.
Because this is going to cost me some money if we keep talking. And speaking of money, I always spend money on new books, new Star Trek books. And we have some news about 2 new books coming out. The first one is an ebook called I, the Constable. And of course, this is part of Deep Space Nine. This book is coming out November of 2017, and it's by Dan's friends that he's met last year at Shore Leave, Paula M. Block and Terry J. Erdman. How does he say it? Erdman?
Erdman, yeah.
Erdman. So this is a pocketbook publication, 150 pages. Like I said, it's an ebook. In the United States, the list price is $2.99. So if you don't read a lot of Star Trek books, or if you do and you don't have a lot of time, this book is going to be a quick read, 150 pages. I'm assuming this is an Odo book.
Yeah, I definitely
Quark.
think so. With that title, of course, I, the Constable. And we know from the Deep Space Nine series, he was a big fan of those Mickey Spillane novels. And of course, a really famous one being I, the Jury. So I'm thinking there's some sort of tie in there. And yeah, really excited to read this one. I love these ebooks, you know, they're just a great length to kind of get through in an afternoon and, you know, really enjoy a Star Trek story that feels like a Star Trek episode.
I can't help but think that Quark is going to have a big part in this because they really have been known to be writing a lot of Quark stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely, you know, getting some Quark and Odo interaction, you know, stuff that you really miss from the series, right? So I think this is going to be really cool.
Yeah, something quirky. That would be really great. So yeah, this is coming out on or around November 13th. We don't have an exact date, but it looks like it's definitely in mid-November. Amy, have you read any Star Trek ebooks? There haven't been a whole lot.
No, I haven't.
So now you know where to start.
Well, get me on a next gen and you got something there.
There have been a few next gen ones over the years, so
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
You Are Quarterly Uninvited was actually one. And it was Picard and Crusher's wedding, and Q shows up. So that would have been right up your alley.
Because we do know that Amy likes Q books.
Apparently.
Well, maybe you would like something a little more illogical. Because we have another book coming out called Search for Spock. No, this is not Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. This book is Search for Spock, a Star Trek book of exploration, a highly illogical parody. And this is by Rob Perlman. Now, do you guys remember the Where's Waldo books? It was these books that you would buy, you open it up, there's several pages, but there'd be like a 2-page spread that would be all these drawings of all these little people, like hundreds of little people. And you had to look for the guy with the brown glasses and the red and white striped hat and shirt. And that was Waldo. You had to find Waldo in the picture. Did you ever play with those books and look for Waldo?
Oh, yeah. I had a stack of those books when I was a kid, and I think I had the wall calendar one year. I loved Where's Waldo.
Yes, I did. I had lots of nieces and nephews, and they were and are very annoying. But it's pretty fun because you're looking, and when you look at the drawings and the little characters, oh, that's cute, that's cute. And then you don't only have to look for Waldo. They have lists of other things that you can find as well. So I liked them.
Well, that would be the same with Search for Spock. So in this case, instead of looking for Waldo, you're looking for Spock. So think of the Where's Waldo books, but now make it all Star Trek. So as you're looking for Spock, just imagine all the different Star Trek characters and creatures that you're going to see in this book. And it says on the cover, it includes 15 strange new missions. And so we have an example on there too. I mean, I've already found Spock. That was quick. But I see Harry Mudd, for example.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You see that on the cover?
Yeah.
And a Gorn.
And Bruce, your favorite green ladies.
The
Orion.
The Orion slave girls.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, it's funny. When I first saw this, I was like, that's cute. How neat. And now I'm thinking back to Where's Waldo and just imagining looking for Spock on these. Darn it, I really want this now.
I know, it looks fun. And it's not just Search for Spock, right?
I assume not. With the, what did you say, 15 strange new missions and stuff?
Well, yeah.
Because it says
strange new missions.
Yeah.
It says, activities and crafts. There's games and puzzles. There's parodies and stuff. I don't know if it's all just searching for Spock, but I could have swore I remember something a couple years ago, something just like this. And they had I had to find 5 Spocks in it. And I don't know where I saw that before, but it wasn't in a book. I don't know where it was, but I remember playing the Search for Spock. Maybe it was a test in a magazine or something. I don't know. But if anybody listening remembers or knows what I'm talking about, write us in at trek.fm/contact and send us an email and let us know. Because I could have swore I remember doing this once before. Or maybe I just dream these things.
You're ahead of the times there, Bruce.
Well, this book is published by Cider Mill Press. It's 32 pages, and it's coming out October 2017. And the U.S. list price is a $14.95 hardcover. So look for that towards the end of October. And spent hours and hours searching for Spock. Anyway, Amy, you're on a podcast called Earl Grey. That's all about the next generation.
It is.
But you're also now on a podcast called The Edge, which is all about Star Trek Discovery.
I am.
So you must have seen episodes before we have if you're on a podcast about Discovery. So give us the scoop. What's going on with Discovery?
Well, I have seen episodes already ahead of the game but have signed an agreement that I wouldn't be able to say anything. So, no, I'm just kidding. I haven't seen anything.
You wish.
I know. I do wish. That would be awesome if they would let us podcasters in on the scoop, beforehand. That'd be cool.
A couple episodes back, we mentioned about someone posting on Facebook about on Amazon in the UK, it listed the new Discovery novel coming out called Desperate Hours by David Mack. And in the UK, it listed both paperback and ebook. And all of a sudden, the paperback was gone. It was missing from the Amazon UK page. And so there was worry that maybe the paperback isn't going to be available in the UK. Well, since then, Andrew, who had made that original post on Facebook, got a reply from Amazon UK confirming that there was a little error. They corrected the problem. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, you in the UK can get a paperback version of Desperate Hours. Thank you very much. You're good to go.
Excellent. Yeah, this sort of thing, I think I mentioned it when we talked about it before. I've noticed this cropping up a lot, especially with the UK Amazon. There'll be little errors. A lot of times the ebook won't be available and then it will and that kind of thing. So, it's really good to see that they've gotten to the bottom of this and fixed that because, like the authors have said when they come on the show, a book's success is really judged a lot by the pre-orders it gets before the actual publication date. So, if there's a whole segment of the population that isn't able to pre-order that book, just physically can't do it, I got to think that's got to show up on some ledger somewhere as being in the negative for that book. So, really glad that this person was able to contact Amazon and get that resolved so that people could pre-order it. That's awesome.
Absolutely. So that's good Discovery news that we have. But Dan, we have other Discovery news. There's more than just a TV show and a novel coming this fall. We also have, comics?
Yes, that's right. We've got the first details on the Star Trek Discovery comics, and they will be coming in October of this year. So the new series, it'll be titled Star Trek Discovery, and the first issue will have 32 pages, priced at $3.99 US. And it's written by friend of the show, Mike Johnson, and Star Trek Discovery TV writer and also friend of the show, Kirsten Beyer. So really awesome news here. And then Tony Chastain, who has done art for Boldly Go and other titles, is doing the artwork and the cover for this book. So really excited. The official blurb from IDW is kind of exciting too. There's not a lot in there, but there are a few little hints, which is really cool. So this is their blurb. Warp into adventure with this new comic book series that ties into the new Star Trek television show premiering in late September on CBS All Access in the US, the Space Channel in Canada, and Netflix throughout the rest of the world. Details remain secretive, so we can't show you covers yet, but we can tell you that you won't want to miss this very special Klingon-centric series. Be prepared for action, adventure, and Star Trek at its best. So that's interesting, Klingon-centric. So it seems like they'll be focusing on the Klingons, maybe not just for that first issue, but it's Klingon-centric series. I'm wondering if the whole series is going to be kind of focused on the Klingons' point of view.
I don't know. If I knew nothing about Discovery, which we don't know a whole lot, reading this blurb makes me a little worried that Discovery's just going to be all about Klingons, and I don't really want it to be quite like that. And I know it probably isn't. I mean, I'm sure they have a big part of the storyline, but maybe the comics, I guess I'm reading this, is going to focus maybe a little more on the Klingons than the TV show, but add a lot of background detail to the characters that were going to be introduced into the TV series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess we won't really know until we get it in our hands and can flip through it. But, really excited for the really aggressive marketing they're doing with Discovery and kind of pushing things on all fronts. The TV show, the book, the comic, all coming out around the same time. It's pretty cool. There are also some details for other series and comics coming out in October. So in October, of course, we get Mirror Broken issue number 5 of 6. And we get Boldly Go number 13, which is subtitled Idic. And it has a really interesting cover. I don't know, Bruce, if you've clicked over to that link that I've included in the show notes. There's a cover art of Captain Kirk. I'm really not sure what to make of this. It's kind of split into a bunch of different segments.
Yeah, it's like different faces.
Yeah. So I'm wondering...
Like General Chang from Star Trek 6, it almost looks like with the eye patch.
Mm-hmm.
The rest, I'm not even sure. It's almost like above the eye patch, almost looks like Khan from Into Darkness.
Okay.
To me.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I think we've got the Silver Surfer in the bottom left. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Yeah, at first I thought maybe that was something to do with Jayla.
Yeah, because of the facial marks.
Or remember the beginning, was it Into Darkness with the people? Oh, that was yellow. Oh, wait, no, they were dressed in yellow, but their faces were white.
Oh, right, the kind of pebbly-faced guys. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really interesting. It almost looks like... Chris Pine's character on the far left, he played in Wonder Woman, which I can't remember his name right now. Steve Trevor. Is that right?
Yeah.
His version of playing that character.
I guess because of his little 5 o'clock shadow.
Maybe. It's those eyes, those blue eyes.
It's definitely Chris Pine, and it is a fabulous photo of him, or drawing.
I was on a plane one time in first class and didn't know he was on the plane until I was getting off. And this guy across the aisle as we're waiting to get off is just like looking at me. And I noticed these eyes, these blue. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, it's Captain Kirk.
No way.
So I hid my Star Wars novel I was reading at the time. I'm like, of all times, I'm always reading Star Trek. This one time I'm reading Star Wars. No, can't let that happen. Well, that's pretty cool. I love all these covers. And the Mirror Broken, we should have issue 3 out here soon, and wanted to cover that with Amy while she was on the show. But
I'm so disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see. Maybe we'll just kind of review them all together when they're all finished coming out, and we'll see how that works. But we'll definitely keep our eyes open for issue number 3 coming out soon. And by the time you guys listen to this, it may already be out. So you're already ahead of us.
Mm. And one last issue for October is another New Visions comic. What Pain It Is to Drown is the title. And it looks like we've got a sunken USS Enterprise underwater. So
why do you think it's sunken? The Enterprise can go underwater, Dan.
Well, apparently, according to the Kelvin timeline anyway. Anyway. No, I love it. It's fine.
I thought this was an image of the Enterprise in a glass of Sprite.
It kind of looks like it. There seems to be a lot of carbonation around it.
Yeah, or a club soda. I'll have a club soda with a dash of Enterprise, please.
The Enterprise is trapped in a bottle of Zima. Anybody remember Zima? Anyone?
Yes.
Yes. What? Where did that come from, Dan?
Well, it was just, clear beer. Why was that a thing? And why is that no longer a thing? Anyway. Well, we should probably move on before our listeners' eyes roll out of their sockets.
That's right. So we're going to go on to our feature where we're going to talk about Q Zone, and we'll talk about most of the book. I wouldn't say there's spoilers, but we'll save the more spoilers towards the end of it. But I think we're pretty safe since it's a middle book. We're not going to reveal too much. So yeah, let's go in because Amy's read it, right?
I have.
Let's do it. Okay, so now we're here in the feature, and it seems nice, cozy, and warm in here, and I like being in the feature area. But this, as I mentioned, is the middle book of a trilogy of books. So last time it was Q, I don't even remember.
Space.
What was it? It's Q Space, thank you. Then now we've got Q Zone, and then the third book will be Q Strike.
Right.
Is that the third book because 3 strikes you're out?
Oh, good way to remember that.
And maybe number 2 was Zone because I don't have anything on that one. So anyway, so let's jump in this book by Greg Cox, by the way. And I just have to say, what annoyed me with the first book annoyed me in the second book too. It starts off with a star date of 500146.3. Really? A 6-digit star date again. What is up with that?
This is basic stuff, people. I mean, I know Star Trek fans are known to be a very forgiving group who don't obsess over small details, and, you can probably just let stuff like that slide because, Star Trek fans don't really care about the really tiny nitpicky things like that. But darn it, come on. I'm lying, of course. Star Trek fans care about this stuff. What's going on? Why are you destroying my Star Trek?
But hasn't it been discussed that star dates, that they're not linear, that there's no... I'm just, if the star dates don't really have any meaning except for just to say this is a day in history, then what's an extra digit? No, I'm just kidding. I'm a math teacher. Digits matter.
Well, we're here in the year 20,017. I mean, it doesn't... No big deal.
Or I wondered, because this takes place at the edge of the galaxy, maybe they have to adjust the star date because of the location that they're in. It's such a stretch. I know. I know. Okay, we'll just ignore it. Again, it's I think it's, somebody fat fingered a digit in there, a 0. It should be like 50146.3.
It was nil again.
There you go. He's inserting himself again.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that. So the star date isn't the real star date. It's been adjusted because Nil inserted himself into the date.
That's right.
Okay, so Nil is a 0 in this book. So he is...
Yeah.
What?
So since we're
Math
talking
teacher.
about him. Yeah. So remember, well, if you do, last time I was on and talking about Q Space, we saw the character Zero in the book. And so I think all of us agreed that we called him Zero as we were reading it. And then it wasn't till like the very end of the book when he referred to himself as Nil. And so, but it was interesting this time. So now as I was reading it, almost from the get-go, it says, when you're reading it, it has 0 and then nil next to it. So now in this book, he was nil to me. I thought that was interesting. Did you make that switch, or were you still calling him 0?
Yeah,
I was going with Nil
Yeah.
for the same reason you said.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. I originally had 0 stuck in my head, so I think I was kind of going back and forth, like kind of, nil, right,
Yeah, Neil didn't stand out with me in the first book, but in the second book, I wasn't sure if it was because it was mentioned earlier in the book or if it was because we discussed it in that prior episode. But Nil stood in my mind as the name Nil. I keep wanting to say Neil because I know several Neils. And now when I see a Neil, I'll probably call them Nil, and I'll really mess things up.
The threat to the galaxy. Behold, the Scourge of Neil. Oh, man, now that's going to be in my head when I read book 3.
Well, Nil is a bad influence on our young Q, because in the book, we have older Q with Picard looking back at a period of time, almost like a Christmas carol, going back, and instead of seeing Picard's life as a young lad, we're seeing Q's life as a very young lad, like billions and billions of years ago. And Nil is really the bad friend that you don't want your kid to ever play with. He is just a really bad influence, and Q seems to want to help certain species along in these tests that they're conducting on a cloud of species or a planet of species or whatever. But Nil always seems determined to really distress this race of beings and doom them to fail, to reach failure in whatever they're trying to do. Trying to survive, that's not good enough. They've got to fail. And in Nil's mind, if this race is passing the tests that they're conducting on them, well, then they're cheating and they must be stopped. So he challenges them more and basically puts them in a situation where they can't win and they're basically destroying themselves. But Q, on the other hand, he wants to see them succeed. But at the same time, if he doesn't go along with what Nil, see, I said Neil. If he doesn't go along with what Nil is doing and testing him, then Q himself feels like he's failing his test with him. Mm-hmm. So, Amy, you had some questions about that. You were about the Q mind versus Nil.
Yeah. So, we see with this book has more words in it that I can't pronounce. I just read over, that's what it means.
Because you're a math teacher, not an English teacher.
Oh my gosh. So the civilization that they're testing, quote unquote, TKon, is that, or is the T silent?
No, it's TKon Empire. They're from season 1 of TNG. The Last Outpost was the episode. The first Ferengi episode, which might be why it's blocked from your mind.
There you go. Oh, I don't remember.
Understandable.
TKon. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay not to remember that episode.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so we get Nil telling Q, well, now here's your chance. This is a great civilization, and so what are you going to do to test them? Oh, and it was hilarious. So what Q does for his first little test, he sends down, I could just all these tomato type fruits. That was so funny in my mind. Just raining tomatoes, rotten tomatoes, ripe tomatoes, whatever, splashing everywhere. And this poor civilization. I mean, what would you think if it was just raining tomatoes? That would be so bizarre. And so Neil's like, no, that's stupid. What is that? Well, so then Q is having to defend himself and like, oh, well, in his mind, he's thinking, well, that's not good enough, and so I better do something to impress my friend over here, Neil. And, but yeah, so what is Neil, what do you think makes a fair test, that the civilization ends in destruction? Is that what he considers fair? And then so why does he even call it a test? Is he calling it a test just to get Q to be more involved?
I feel like, to me, Neil is, the kid with the magnifying glass next to the anthill. Or,
oh my gosh, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
Well, oh my gosh, we're thinking so much alike on this. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's the bully who, trumps up these reasons to do what he does, but in actuality, he's just cruel and he's capricious and just awful. He's the kid that pulls the wings off flies and starts by putting little barricades in the way of ants so they have to go around it and then just ends up killing them, kind of thing. Like he's just a bully, basically. In my mind, as I read. And
so with Q, like he would be the one to put, a barricade or whatever. But when the ants go around, then it seemed like Q was satisfied and yay, they passed the test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Whereas, that's not. I think, the line in the book is, this isn't a test, this is blood sport kind of thing, and that's all that Neil's interested in, is just causing destruction and chaos wherever he goes, kind of thing.
Yeah, and tomatoes aren't good enough. It doesn't cause enough destruction and chaos. It's kind of like a softball to them. I mean, it's cloudy with a chance of tomatoes.
Exactly.
And it's like Neil is the kid that takes the good kid along down the street to go play and have fun and has some eggs with him and throws eggs at a house, and the other kid's like, oh no, I don't think we should do that. That's not very nice. We shouldn't throw eggs at houses. Oh, come on, everybody does it. It's fun. Here, give it a try. And he influences the other kid to throw the egg, the good kid, and all of a sudden that kid's hanging out with a bad crowd and throwing eggs at houses and toilet papering houses and whatever. And I don't know why Neil has to be so bad in doing these things unless the power that he has influenced his decision making. He can't seem to rein in his power. He abuses it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember, and I mean, it's an old story. We've seen this play out in lots of different mediums before. I'm reminded of, just off the top of my head, the Simpsons episode from way back when, where Bart starts hanging around with Nelson, and Nelson gives him a gun to shoot at a bird, and Bart's like, oh, I don't want to shoot at a bird, so he aims away from the bird but ends up shooting it because, according to Nelson, the gun pulls a little to the left. Wow, you're awesome, you got him. And Bart feels awful. That kind of reminds me of this, the quote unquote good kid falling in with the bad crowd. And yeah, it's an old story, sadly.
Well, and I don't think that Q ever asked, what is the purpose of testing the civilization? And so without knowing the purpose, Neil could have now I said it, Neil could have, one purpose of destruction and end the civilization, while Q is thinking, well, we're going to test them and to see if they can go beyond where they are now and to help them grow. Like Q's purpose is to help them grow and to expand their thought knowledge. And, while Neil is saying, let's destroy them. And so I don't think that they really discuss the purpose there. So Q is just going along blindly following.
Well, we're talking about Neil doing something bad, but according to like what Dan was saying, the analogy of the magnifying glass with the ants, we don't really think twice about killing an ant. I mean, my kids see a tiny spider in the house and, Daddy, kill it, kill it, kill it. And, I kill it. I don't think twice about it. It's almost like because we're a certain higher power, in a sense, than than these little insects. And so, is it really a bad child to kill an ant and encourage another kid to kill an ant? I mean, I don't think if my daughters came home and said, Daddy, there was this boy on the playground, he had me step on an ant. Am I mean? Am I a bad girl? I'd probably say, no, you're not a bad girl because you stepped on an ant. So from the perspective of Nil and Q, is it really bad from their perspective to do what they're doing? It may not just be anything. To us, it's something because we relate to those races and species getting abused, but to them, it really is nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, clearly Q feels some sort of remorse or pangs of, ooh, I don't know if this is right exactly. But your analogy is pretty good. I mean, the Q supposedly and Nil are so high above humanoids like us that it would be comparable maybe to us and ants, or us and, I don't know, a field of deer. I don't know, like there's definitely an order of magnitude difference possibly. And I know I'm using that term wrong there.
Oh, no. Well, yeah. And it's like, where do we draw the line? Yeah. Oh, okay. We stepped on an ant. We don't, beat ourselves up for it. But, then you get to, animal cruelty and, endangered species, and so where does that line come into play? If they're going to wipe out the entire solar system of the TKon, that's pretty significant. That's endangering a species, and so I don't know. Do you value the different species and the differences there, or is it just such a lower form of life form that it's an ant?
Mm-hmm. And to extend the metaphor a little bit further too, if there were a group of kids, and this happens, going around the neighborhood and capturing pets and torturing them or mutilating them, like that is something that's considered horrific to us and is, often used as a sign of like some sort of psychotic behavior, So, maybe the, humanoid species aren't on the same level as Q, but Q's reaction seems to be that that's maybe the kind of level that it's at, people going around and killing or harming animals for sport, which, depending on the context, we as a society have either said is okay or not okay in various situations. And, I'll leave it to the philosophers and people higher on that level than me to sort out the right and wrong of that. But, that's maybe kind of more what I'm bringing to mind than, the ants and the anthill kind of thing.
Considering what we're saying about Q and Nil, do you think this story makes Q seem a softer character to you now than he did before because he's not abusing the power in such a way as Nil does?
I think so. I mean, the thing about Q is, and especially later on, he came across more as, kind of actually doing what Nil was saying he was doing, is testing us and that sort of thing. And there always seemed to, at least, in the end, be a sort of purpose towards it, especially if you take all good things as like the culmination of the trial of humanity and all that kind of stuff. There is some sort of altruistic, soft side of Q. Picard maybe early on saw him as we see Nil here, just toying with humanity to get laughs, but maybe there's something deeper to it than that, and maybe he's, not as sadistic as we might think.
I might have to disagree. I think when we see Q in the series, especially TNG, like I think that we do see him wanting to help humanity, even from the get-go. I mean, offering Riker powers of the Q, you know, it's like, look what you could have, expand your mind, you know. So it seems like Q's purpose always was to help in his weird way, to help us to become better, to think outside of the box, you know, just explode your mind, you know, with these new ideas. So I don't see him as changing my perspective in these books. I see him being just actually more like us, because he's falling into this peer pressure of Nil and the gang there, you know, and trying to fit in and trying to please others, when you're like, well, if you're omnipotent and all powerful, why do you care what other people and other entities think of you? So I think it made him more human, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gave him more of a humanity to him. And you know, you're not necessarily born evil, and I'm not saying Q is born evil, and he's not evil, but he definitely is influenced from the peer pressure he's getting from Nil when it's testing humanity and other species. He just doesn't go as far as Nil does, and maybe wanting to just destroy the species or humanity, but to just play with it. And maybe Q would never even get involved with humans at all if it wasn't for Nil. And Nil kind of opened that door to him. So there was that influence from him. So you got the peer pressure on the one side in this story, but there's kind of like this B story also in the novel about bad parenting. So we go from, like, you know, bad friends to bad parents in a sense, because we have the Professor Lem Thao, who's on the Enterprise, and he's really not a very good father to his two children. He brings them along as he's doing these experiments of wanting to go into the barrier on the outer end of the galaxy here. And he is so on the edge, yes.
Cross promotional
name.
Podcast plug.
Yeah. But he's so consumed to see his project to completion, because apparently this will help him to achieve some immortality or something like that. But anyway, he and his children are betazoids, and his son Milo eventually reaches out to his father telepathically. So his dad comes into the guest quarters that they're staying on the Enterprise, and the two children are there playing, and he barely acknowledges them, barely talks to them. He goes into the other room, and finally Milo's just got to a point. I think he's around 10 years old or something like that in the book. And he reaches out mentally to his father next room and is like, you know, Dad, we need you, help. And his father just closes that mental connection. He puts a wall up. I thought how much that destroys a child when he finally reaches out to his dad and says, we need you. And he just closes them off. He's so self-absorbed in what he's trying to accomplish.
And not only Milo, but the little sister, she was crying. And he still, I mean, to turn away a child as dad, you know, but a crying child that's your own, that's pretty harsh. That's, you know, and I think they sort of play it off as, well, it's his sickness. But is it really? I don't know.
Yeah, this is definitely a character that I had a really hard time with while reading this book. And I mean, you know, I've been really lucky. I have two parents who love me and they're awesome, and they've always been there for me. And I, you know that if I need them, that, you know, they'll be there in a heartbeat kind of thing. So yeah, I had a really hard time with this character, and just immediately dislike of him, and yeah, it was hard to read. Like, it was, I had a really hard time figuring him out kind of thing. And I mean, you know, he is under, you know, some influence and that sort of thing, especially, you know, once the Enterprise makes its way into the barrier to avoid the Calamarain. But at the same time, you know, that seems to have been there already, and it's ugly. I really hated that.
I was curious because when basically people on the Enterprise D, like Deanna, she's, part empathic. And so to have these full-on betazoids on the ship, I'm surprised that she wasn't more in tune with Fall and more specifically his children, because, Milo kept reaching out and searching for his father, and that she wasn't aware of that. I mean, she obviously was very busy at the time, but that was sort of going in the back of my mind, like, as a counselor, you don't want to turn away anyone who's in pain or suffering, and obviously these children are. And I found that either very good of her to stay focused on her task and her job for the Enterprise, or oddly weird that she wasn't more sympathetic to the kids.
Yeah, I kept expecting Troy to show up and take an active part in this, but
exactly.
I guess maybe we'll see that in the third book, because I'd be surprised if we didn't see that. I know Dan has read these books more than once, so he probably knows the answer, so don't give it away.
My lips are sealed.
So yeah, it really, what is driving this man to just ignore his kids? And I am wondering, Dan, like you were saying, is it the influence from whatever is on the other side of the barrier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a very driven man, and very, I feel like maybe there's some sort of allegory to be made here, people who are so focused on their careers or their work that they ignore their family or something like that. But it's to the nth degree here. And it's hard to read, because I really find myself sympathizing. I can't say empathizing, because I've never been there, but definitely sympathizing with these children. And I just, like not even my own children. If I saw two kids suffering like this, my heart would just immediately go out to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough. My brother on my mom's side, I saw him when he made that switch like Milo did and just give up on his father. I saw my own brother go through that with his father, and it broke my heart. I mean, I will always remember that, and I'm scarred a little bit because of it, because of what this man did to my brother. And it's harsh and very, very sad. I don't want to cry about it, but yeah.
Oh, that's
okay.
awful.
Well, we'll try not to have you cry on this episode. Well, speaking of crying, let's go to something a little more merry. We've got some not so merry men in this episode. So Nil pulls out these, I don't want to say he pulls out, but he encourages the Guardian of Forever to release these 3 entities coming out of the Guardian of Forever, and one is named Gorgon, who is a silver-haired humanoid with a green aura. And I thought, okay, yeah, I've seen stuff like that in Star Trek before. And then this other being comes out, which I can't say the name because it's not written in any kind of language. It's 2 parentheses with an asterisk in the middle. And it's this shimmering sphere that we eventually find out that feeds from hate. And I'm like, oh, I know something like that. And
Sounds
then
familiar?
there's the one who emerges in a pillar of fire and initially comes out 50 meters tall, and he's got a flowing white beard. It almost sounds very godlike. And even when he's referred to as like with a capital E, is it like God or whatever? So I'm getting some reactions just from you guys' faces as to these characters, and I'm trying to feel like, have we seen these before?
Yeah, they seem very familiar, don't they? Well, watchers of the original Star Trek series, of course, will know that the Gorgon is from, and in the outline, I have to say, Amy, you may be a math teacher, but I was an English teacher, and I used a lot of alliteration here. The absolutely abysmal, awful, atrocious, abominable, appalling episode, And the Children Shall Lead. The single worst episode in the history of Star Trek. Arguably, but not really arguably. The Gorgon was that shimmering green guy that was played by a lawyer, not even an actor. who encouraged those kids to sing rhymes to summon him and killed their parents. And it was awful. Awful episode. I can't believe they pulled this character out of that episode and Greg Cox actually made him interesting. I have no idea how that happened, but apparently, yeah.
So, Amy, you had a reaction about the parentheses.
Yes. So if you listen to Literary Treks, and Dan mentioned, I can't even remember what episode, you were talking about weird names, and you're like, yeah, and I have even read this name, and it's just an asterisk, so I don't even want to try and pronounce that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is in the book. So I made a connection there to what you had mentioned previously.
Yeah, this book, and of course we had the doctor's orders that used a semicolon, AT for, yeah, I mean, it's things you can get away with in a book because your mind can just kind of gloss over it while you're reading, and, you know, whatever sound or non-sound your brain makes while you read it. But, you know, now we get on a podcast and talk about the darn thing.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do? But, and this entity didn't even have a name. It's, of course, from the original series episode, The Day of the Dove. It's the little spinning light that made the Klingons and the Kirk's crew fight each other with swords on the Enterprise to generate hate. And the planet in that episode is Beta 12A. So if you look in the Star Trek Encyclopedia or Memory Alpha, this is simply known as the Beta 12A entity.
Well, when I was reading it, you know, and I saw the asterisk, I went straight to the bottom of the page saying, okay, where's the footnote?
That's awesome.
Yeah, the early Star Trek novels used to do that. I mean, really long time ago. They used to refer to other novels and episodes, and they'd have the asterisk, but they haven't done that for a long time.
Mm-hmm. I remember the comics did that a lot, too.
Yeah. Yeah, no more asterisks, but we have that in this book. So yeah, that was kind of fun when these beings appeared. It's like, wait a second. I think I know who these are. So that was pretty fun. So they're in Neil, not Neil. They're in Neil's little band of brothers here, and they're causing all kinds of crap going on, you know, just messing with all the ants of the world. So now, let's go back to this TKon Empire that Amy was talking about before, because these entities do try to mess with that society. So we have I don't know. Just bear with me now when I try to work this name out here. Glevi, I'm going to say Glevi, because it's written like Levi with a G in front of it. Glevi Sov.
Yeah.
That's about as good an attempt as I would be able to make as well.
I'm just going to call her Glevi because I like the sound of that. So Glevi is an empress of the TKon Empire. And the problem is that their world may be destroyed because their star is going to go nova. It's going to blow up and destroy their planet. So they now have come up with a technology that they can move that sun out of the way and bring in another younger star to serve as their sun, which is very impressive. And even Q's impressed by this. And so, okay, well, we're going to test these guys out, right? Because we test everybody out, no matter how good or how bad they are. So the band of brothers, or the three stooges along with Nil, come in and try to cause all kinds of stuff going on or whatever. And the Empress, this moving the sun, is called the project is called the project is called the Great Endeavor. Okay. So at the same time, we see another one of these outer worlds associated to the Empire called Razam, and they refuse to pay taxes, and they want to break away from the Empire, and they shout things like, "Down with the Empress." At the same time, what is really encouraging the crowd to get themselves all revved up is Gorgon, that's basically whispering in their ears of, yes, you want to break away. Yes, you do not want to pay their taxes. He's like their subconscious talking to them. So what are your guys' thoughts about this part of the story and about these societies and the Empress and this TKon Empire?
Well, personally, I loved the world building of the TKon Empire. I mean, this is this great empire that's mentioned that, died out, some years ago. It's, this abandoned planet that they find in the last outpost in TNG. And I just love that just from that, Greg Cox is able to build this society. And it's interesting. I really like the characters. I like what they've been able to build. And, this idea that they're going to literally move the heavens, basically. They're going to, swap out their star for another one. Like, that's really cool. What an interesting idea. And, the thing that, the inciting incident that's bringing them down, Gorgon, I loved how Greg Cox used his character in this way. I never thought of, that being, a staple of his character, that he incites youth to rebel against, the older generation, which is what happened in that episode, and the children shall lead. But it was really interesting to see it on this, planetary, this empire scale kind of thing. It was really cool. Also, just to pop back, I should also mention the third member of their band of brothers. Do you recognize where he's from? The Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, the god, in quotes, at the center of the galaxy. The one creating disasters of biblical proportions.
Yeah, I forgot we didn't cover that, but yeah, right. So God, he's the flowing white beard one. The one that they call the one in the book.
Yeah, God in quotation marks. But yeah, no, I love the TKon Empire. I thought and that's, again, I say this a lot, but it's one of the great things about the novels is they can take, just a few throwaway lines in the TV show and really create something out of it. And the TKon Empire is really cool. Like, I would have loved to have been a citizen of the TKon Empire, had what happened in this novel not happened.
Yeah, but which planet would you wanted to live on? I found that interesting too. 'Cause, like, they had the main planet and then, the outer planets, and they were rebelling, and it sort of made me feel like, taxation without representation type of thing. I mean, they were just being taxed and they're not getting the benefits and blah, blah, blah. And, all your typical political complaints, of the system, but I liked, because they were having all of what Neil was doing and everyone, and it goes through 60 years spread time,
something about that.
And so then the Empress, finally comes to this realization that maybe her being this Empress isn't the best thing, and tries to stop all of these wars and what's been spreading because of the gang of bandits over here. And she says, let's just get the sun, this great endeavor. Let's finish that, and then I will step down. And I thought that's, pretty darn impressive to contrast. Here she has this power over, basically an entire solar system, and she's willing to give it up to save her society and her power there. And then you have the power of the Q and Nil, where they are exercising their power to the nth degree, like you talked about.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was thinking of that earlier. It's like, now we see someone who has power that's not abusing it.
Yeah.
And that she does have sympathy for her own people, but maybe it's because they are her own people and not some other species that she looks that are lesser than her or themselves. I mean, it's kind of scary to think that intelligent life can look down on other intelligent life just because they're less advanced or they're smaller or whatever reason. But I mean, we're getting close to some spoiler territory now as to what happens with this society and how they react to everything. But I at this point in the story, I started to get a little bored. It's almost like the way Amy started off, like, oh, it's your taxes. It's the same political stuff. That was the part of me that was just like, oh, yeah, here we go. But I will tell you that once I got further in the book, it really enriched the society for me. So the impact of what happens later was there. And what I really loved was the scene towards the beginning of the storyline with the TKons was the Empress and how she started off her day and how she would get up in the morning and she didn't want help from her assistants or servants or whatever in the morning. She could get out of bed herself, take care of herself, go to her desk, read the stories, prepare for the day. And it plays out this long scene of her doing this. And I guess that's the point where I was just kind of like, okay, this is kind of boring.
And eating her honey.
And eating her honey,
that
yes.
was very interesting to me.
But, okay, so why was the honey very interesting to you?
I just thought, what a weird insert into the description of her day. And that every time, it started with her young and being a young empress and then, jumped 50 years, 10 years, 60 years later. And that she was still having that honey. And that at the beginning, she was hesitant to eat it because it was a rare commodity. And then, or was that at the end? But I just remember it showed that she had compassion because this honey was a treat. It was rare. And so for her to be enjoying it, she almost felt guilty, especially at the end, eating it. And I think it just showed her compassion for her people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And that scene when we see her 50 some years later, the scene plays out almost the same way. She gets out of bed, she's getting help from her servants. I was like, oh, this is so cool. It's like that scene that I was bored with earlier is now like one of my favorite scenes because of this reason. We see her day play out almost the same way it did 50 years earlier. And like you said, with the honey. So I really enjoyed it by that point. But in the first like few chapters of the society and the taxes and everything, it just wasn't doing it for me. But things change as you go along through the book. I guess that's the intention, right? So they basically are starting to pass the test because they're getting ready to move this failing sun out of the way. And it looks like things are going well. But no, Nil can't have that because... And Gorgon can't have that. All these guys can't have that. So Gorgon actually takes his hand and reaches into the sun. And young Q is trying to stop him. But the other entities are holding him back. And Q's just fighting him. No, don't do this. You're going to destroy them. And basically it's the same thing. They're passing the test. So for Gorgon and the others, well, if you're passing the test, you're basically failing the test because you can't pass our test. You always have to fail. So we have to step in and do something. And I really like the Empress at this point because she always suspected that there had to be some powerful alien being who is testing them. I thought that was really interesting that here's a society that, from what I can tell, hasn't had any interaction with powerful alien beings, yet she has to figure that everything that's been going on had to have been influenced by something else.
Yeah, it was definitely a really interesting turn. And I love that. Like, over the course of this, basically the last half of this book, like, I really start to fall in love with this Empress. She's a great leader. And what happens is so completely, totally unfair. It makes me think of like, those kids that just cannot stand to lose at Monopoly or something, like when the other guy gets Boardwalk and Park Place and you land on it a couple times and then you flip the board because, this is stupid. You were cheating, blah, blah, blah. I can't, that's what these guys are doing. They're flipping the Monopoly board. And that's what happens, like you said, we're getting into spoiler territory here. Of course, they destroy the entire empire and Q is aghast at this. And it really, the work that Greg Cox did in the world building of the TKon Empire just totally pays off here because you as a reader, or at least I as a reader, was absolutely devastated to see this entire society wiped out. And I mean, it's not unexpected. We know that they no longer exist by the 24th century, but still, just to see it happen and how just arbitrarily it happened is just so devastating.
Well, and I think when you say, well, when we first meet the Empress, like she's waking up, going through her routine, And she has this feeling, intuition, whatever you want to call it, that, well, something's not quite right. And she checks with her generals and gets the news for the day. And, and so from the beginning that we meet her, we see that she has this intuition. And it isn't until 50 years later that she does finally figure it out, that there's got to be something out there, bigger, stronger, more powerful than us, that's testing us. And it's at that point when Q's like, yeah, so again, it's just reinforcing what we know about Q. It's like she made that mental jump to come to that conclusion. And so she's stretching her mind and thinking outside of the box. And so in Q's mind, that's the test, and that they pass. But we get a glimpse of that, a little precursor, or what is it called? Anyways, yeah, a precursor with her having that intuition, at the very beginning when we meet her, to getting to the final conclusion that there must be external forces at play here.
Yeah, and of course, then, the TKon Empire is destroyed as the sun blows up, and I thought was really chilling is what Nil says to Q. He says, pretty soon, Q, it won't bother you at all. Mm-hmm. Now, to be insensitive to this happening is not the direction you want to take somebody, and especially something as powerful as Q is. So, Dan, of course, you've read the third book before. Are we in for a real roller coaster here in this next book? Is it going to get kind of scary?
I shouldn't say anything. You guys should just read it. Hey, you guys get to go to Vegas.
Oh.
I get this. Let me have this.
Now we're being tortured by Dan. Nil has infected him.
Well, I guess with the third book called Q Strike, maybe that does imply something bad is going to happen. He's striking down on something. I don't know. Anyway, I won't. But the last lines, and huge spoiler now, the last line of the book is, it was the beginning of the first Q war, ... Any thoughts on
first? That? So that first means there's multiple. Well, more than one, I guess.
I mean, as fans of Voyager would know, they had a little civil war there for a while that were sending off supernovas and stuff. So, would that maybe be the second Q war? I don't know.
Well, I think we get a glimpse of this, like when the female Q comes back for a visit and talks to Q, and you can see the division right there. And she's like, dude, what are you doing with these hooligans? Mm-hmm. You don't need to be doing this. And he just gets so defensive and arrogant. And we know Q to be very arrogant and don't say I'm doing anything wrong. And so he's just defending, Nil and those bands of bandits there. And so there is that separation, I think. But isn't this the same female Q that we see him? So that's why I'm like, well, they can't part ways here. So I'm thinking there might be a little happening in the next book.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that part really rang true for me. I mean, how many times have you been in an argument and either the other person was wrong and they knew it, or you were wrong and you knew it, but you just get defensive and you start digging in and entrenching your position and that kind of thing. And that argument that they have really struck me as Q knows he's wrong. He knows everything that's going wrong and how horrible it is and how bad it is and how it makes him feel. But, damned if he's going to admit he's wrong. You just can't do that, and it's another tragic thing, because there's so many times in, for example, rewatching old television shows that I've seen a million times or movies, and, some main character is making a decision and that decision's going to change everything. And you've seen it before, how it goes, but you're just willing at the screen for them to make a different decision. And, that's how I felt reading this for the second time here was, well, third time here, I guess, was, Q, don't, come on, like, don't do it. But no, he's gotta make his decision and go through what he goes through.
Yeah, this is like him. He's growing up. He's going through puberty, Q puberty at this point, and he's just kind of puberty. Yes. And so that's, it's a growing age book type thing. And, I feel our listeners feel the same way, Dan, because, you're right all the time and I'm wrong. And they're like, oh, why is Bruce going down the wrong path again?
I wonder the same thing myself. No. I don't think that's true at all.
No, I think you're right. Oh, see, you're right again. Oh, darn. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, since Amy is our guest host, I'm going to ask her for her final thoughts and rank and rating of this book.
All right. Well, I really did enjoy this book, and it was a little slow at times. Again, it had some words that I just couldn't even pronounce. Colloquic. Oh man, I swore I was going to say it correctly. The previous name of the Calamari.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that was
you know
a
how
real
to say
funky
that?
Name.
Okay, Kula Lacritus is how I'm saying it. Anyways, so yeah, again, and so it sort of snapped me out of the moment because I would have to stop and like sound it out, and so those things, that was a little annoying for me, but I did enjoy the story, and as we discussed, obviously almost an hour's worth, very good themes in this book to take away. So I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 galactic barriers.
All right, that sounds good. Dan, what about you?
Well, I really enjoy this book as well. The middle book of a trilogy sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap because, it kind of that middle book lull. But I actually found this one to be a little bit more attention-grabbing than the first book was, for me anyway. I really loved the world building of the TKon Empire, as we've discussed. And, its ultimate fate is really tragic, all the more so because of it. And I love the fact, and I'm kind of noticing a pattern here, Greg Cox pulls things from bad episodes and makes them good. So we get the TKon Empire from The Last Outpost. We get, quote unquote, God from The Final Frontier, which, let's be honest, not the best Star Trek film. The Beta 12A entity, that's actually from a good episode, but the Gorgon is from just the worst episode. And he brings them all together and creates a good story out of it. Like, how does that happen? I don't understand. But I really like where he takes the characters in this book. And for me, the true draw of this book was what happens in Q's past and that whole thing. The Enterprise and the Calamari, it almost seems to be just kind of, holding position a little bit. Like, it doesn't really advance the story forward a lot. We get a little bit, like you said, with Lemfall and his children and that sort of thing, but it kind of seems to be just kind of put a parking brake on it until the next book because, we really want to focus on what's going on in the past. That said, I really enjoyed it, and I think I would have to give this one, I'd say 4 falling tomato-like fruits, but, on somebody who really, really wants them, so it's a good thing.
Someone who loves tomatoes.
Exactly, yeah.
That wants to make some spaghetti sauce or ketchup out of it.
Perfect.
I guess. Well, I guess I'm probably falling a little more in line with Amy on this one. It's like you said, Dan, it's the middle chapter. I feel like the first book was fairly strong. This one, I didn't have as much fun with Q as I usually have in Q books and as much fun as I had with Q and the female Q in the first book. We didn't get a whole lot of female Q in this one, but I felt like this was a good bridge to bring us into something that I think is going to be really epic and good in the next book. At least I hope so. So it wasn't that I didn't like this book, but I just felt like it was setting the stage for the last book. And because I said about the TKon Empire, I was a little bored there. So, it was good, but I'm definitely ready for the next one. So I would say I would give this 3 nils into a long stardate.
I love it.
If that's even possible.
That's good. I like that. So I think, we're primed. We're ready for that third book. We talked a little bit about the middle book lull, but, I can't wait to get all of us back together again to really wrap this series up and talk about Q strikes. So, some good things are going to come out of this. Maybe we didn't all like the book equally, but we all got to sit around and talk about it, which is a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. And I'm looking forward to next time. But that just means it will be my last time on Literary Treks.
No, we'll find many more excuses to get you on. We're not done with you yet.
There's plenty of TNG books, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. I already know of one book we are definitely going to have you on once we schedule it. And I think you remember what it is? Okay.
Yes,
I'm not going to say it because I don't want anybody to start going, when are you going to do this book?
Yeah.
Ooh,
well,
I'm
on
excited.
the round table that you guys hosted, I think it was last month, that book was brought up quite a lot. So
yes, that's your tease right there, right?
I think I know what we're talking about now.
Yes.
Okay. We'll talk about it on the other side of the page.
Well, and if you listen to Earl Grey, that should give you a hint to my sign-off phrase.
Yeah, which, by the way, I'm glad you mentioned the roundtable. So Dan and I hosted the Patreon roundtable here on Trek FM. Was it the July? Yeah, it was the July one.
Yep.
So it was one of the most recent ones, and we were talking with Amy and others on. Well, Amy, were you on that? You were there, yeah. You just said you were.
No, I listened to it.
Okay,
yeah,
that's right.
I was recording Earl Grey at that same time. So
okay, gotcha. Because I remember, yeah. So we had I guess 10 of us on there, and we were talking about Star Trek books. So if you want to hear a bunch of Star Trek fans talking about books for a little over an hour, check that out. So, and then in our next episode 199, we're going to be reviewing Star Trek Preserver, the third book in the Shatnerverse of Mirror Universe stories, which I had never read that one. I read the other two, but for some reason I never read this one. I'm already into it, and it's pretty interesting. So
excellent.
There's just so much to talk about, isn't there?
I mean, what a wonderful problem to have. Let us never run out of Star Trek books to talk about.
Exactly. And of course, it's been fun talking with you guys and about Q Zone and other things here on the show, but it isn't the only thing we've been discussing here on the network. So here's a quick look at some of the other things you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, The Orb.
After the Captain's documentary, I think we all wish that there had been a piano in Sisko's quarters. And at some point in every episode, someone walked in and he was just over in the corner rambling away.
Warp 5.
And there's a wipe from right to left in the screen, and you never see that on Star Trek. It completely pulls me out of the episode every time I see it.
Thanks a lot, because I've never noticed it.
Yeah, I didn't notice it.
Ever!
Now I'm going to see it. Okay.
You just ruined the entire episode for everyone listening.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
The 602 Club.
That's a really smart idea, because that's also something that, Caesar sees, is that we're not that different.
The Ready Room.
As with so many places, CBS in marketing the show and getting it out to as many eyeballs as possible, they're obviously wanting fans and armchair fans and maybe would-be fans, genre fans who might give Star Trek but they're still trying to get out to the great unwashed and the mundanes, and this is actually stretching the season out beyond 15 actual weeks.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
So check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond, and you'll find us wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit that subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they're published. And if you have the time, leave us a star rating and a written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link there as well.
Yeah, and we have we have an email and an iTunes review we want to go over. But before we do that, Amy, you've got to run. So tell us where people can find you.
Well, again, thank you for having me on the show. And you can find me on the network co-hosting Earl Grey with Richard and Lee. And I love showing up on the Babel Conference, so you can find me there. And I am also on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson.
And what's the other podcast you do?
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yes, I'm also co-hosting. It's so brand new. I'm not used to saying it. I'm also a co-host on The Edge, which is a podcast about the new Star Trek Discovery series starting soon. So yay, super excited for that. And that's with Mike, Aaron, and Brandon.
And I've just listened to the first episode, guys. Check it out. It's great. It's really cool, and it's only going to get better as we get closer to Star Trek Discovery. So awesome work on that.
Yeah, there's a few out there, so there's plenty to listen to already.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, thanks, Amy. We enjoyed having you, and until next time, we'll see you when we talk Q Strike.
Yay! Yay! Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye. Well, it was great having Amy here, but I do want to move forward then to these reviews. But before we do that, I want to mention Patreon, because we always mention Patreon because it's so important. Because if you'd like to help us keep all these shows coming to you each and every week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more. Available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month, and we really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. So let's move to this iTunes review here, and the title of it is So Happy I Found This Podcast, and this is from Irredeemable Shag. And they
sorry, that's a great name.
It is. And so Shaggy, that's my nickname for Shaggy, says, I've been a fan of Star Trek novels for over 30 years. It was such a pleasure to discover this podcast and hear these guys discuss the books I enjoy so much. Great conversations, banter, and interviews. I'm working my way through the back catalog of episodes and love each one. If you enjoy Trek books, you must listen to this podcast. Well, Shaggy, I couldn't agree with you more. That's the reason I started listening to this podcast when it first began. And so thank you so much for that review.
Yeah, great glowing review. I mean, man, how can you not feel good after that review? That was, wow, thank you so much.
Oh, and it's 5 stars, so that's good. That's the max you can get. That's more than we gave the novel we just read.
5 stars. That's the most stars.
So then we also received an email from one of our listeners. Stan, do you want to read that one for us?
Yeah, we got an email from Brian Dotree from Louisville, Kentucky. I apologize if I've brought up a touchy subject among Trek fandom, but I wanted to ask your opinions regarding fan fiction. I include not just fans who write stories about relationships between characters, but fans who write the types of general stories you would find in the novels or in the anthologies. How do you regard the writers, and is fanfic something you encourage, discourage, or look the other way on? A second question I had for you, if you would be so kind to address, is the future of the Strange New Worlds series. Is there any possibility of a revival or not? Thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it and your podcast. Well, thank you, Brian, for those kind words. First of all, fanfic. I personally have enjoyed some fanfic over the years. It's not something I've really dove deep into, but definitely not something that I personally discourage. I mean, actually, some of the Star Trek writers got their start doing fanfic. I know Una McCormick actually published some fan fiction before she wrote, professional Star Trek novels. So, I mean, I encourage creativity in any form out there. So, fanfic writers, yeah, that's great stuff. The more the merrier, personally. How about you, Bruce? What are your thoughts on fan fiction?
When I first started reading Star Trek novels in the early 90s, I couldn't get enough Trek. Even to this day, I can't get enough Trek. I would go to the local conventions, Star Trek conventions in my area, and pick up fanzines, and because I wanted to read more stories. And, sometimes there was some good stories and sometimes there wasn't. And I saved all those for a while. As a matter of fact, I even joined a club. I didn't write any stories. It was a club where you could write stories or just read them. And I just would receive a copy in the mail every month of this club that was writing short Star Trek fiction. And again, it was like hit or miss. So I moved away from fan fiction because I never knew what I was really going to get. So I sticked with more of the professionally published licensed material, and I don't really read fan fiction all that often unless someone points out to me, oh, this is really good, you should read this, is good. Then if there's a recommendation for it, I'll go there. But I definitely encourage people to do, if you like to write, and this is your creative outlet, please, do Star Trek fan fiction, and even the video content we've had online with the different fan films have been great too. Some of those have been totally awesome. There's great stories in those too. So,
yeah, definitely. And yeah, regarding the Strange New Worlds series, I think the line that we've typically gotten from Pocket Books has been, if this latest one they did for the 50th anniversary, if it sells well, there's the possibility of more. I don't personally know how well it's done. That would be actually a great question, and we'll add it to our list for when we hopefully get Margaret Clark on sometime in the future to kind of ask about the future of that series. I love Strange New Worlds. I'm slowly making my way right now through the 2017 one because, I kind of want to save the stories. I'm reading one every once in a while kind of thing. So, I would love to see more of those. I miss it coming out year after year, and the kind of thought in the back of my mind that I might maybe one day sort of think about possibly writing a story for it, but that never happened.
Oh, wow. I can't wait for that. That would be cool. Dan, have you ever written fanfic for Star Trek?
I have just nothing that I've put out there, but I've written some short stories and stuff when I was younger, and every once in a while I jot down some ideas that I have and that kind of thing, but I haven't done anything like that in quite a long time, and definitely not anything that I've put out in the public for anyone to see or read or find or anything. So
yeah. No, I mean, I started something a long time ago, but I probably wrote the first scene of the first chapter, and that's as far as I got. So I haven't really done anything since. But yeah, Strange New Worlds, it looks like we're not getting that this year. Of course, we had the one from last year. And like you said, Dan, I like to kind of spread it out. I'll read a story every once in a while. And I actually just finished last year's one like a week or two ago. So I don't even think Pocket Books probably has an idea of when they would do one, but hopefully in 2018, maybe it'll be a every other year type thing.
Never know. That would be really cool for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that email, and thank you, Irredeemable Shag. I just want to say that name again for the iTunes review. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show or any of the episodes we've done in the past, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation, of course, is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's Babel, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select Literary Treks, and that'll come right to us as well. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM.
And you can find us on our Goodreads group, where we have a bookshelf with all of our previously covered books, as well as the currently reading section, so you can see what's coming up for future shows. Plus, you can join in on the great conversations happening there about the books and the comics. So just search for Literary Treks on Goodreads and click Join Group. And we'd like to thank Ken Tripp, Greg Rosier, and Brandon Shea Matala for their support of the Trek FM network and being associate producers for Literary Treks as well. So Dan, when you're not dropping tomatoes on people, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Kertrats. That's Kertrats. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/KertratsProductions, Facebook.com/KertratsProductions, on Instagram at Kertrats47, and you can find me, of course, in the Babel Conference talking about Star Trek. And Bruce, when you're not encouraging the Guardian of Forever to bring your evil posse over from some alternate universe, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex, and you can find me talking Star Wars on the Star Wars Report podcast at StarWarsReport.com. And you can find me, of course, around the Trek FM network. I appear every once in a while, and I'm coming up on an upcoming episode or two of The Edge, so check that out. And you can find me in the Babel Conference. I'm always lurking in there, so love talking Star Trek books online and on the show. Just, it's great because years ago I had no one to talk to when I would read these books, but now I do. I'm so happy.
I suspect a lot of Star Trek readers out there know your pain, and I feel it too. And I'm so happy to have Literary Treks, and both back when I was a listener and now on the show to talk about these books. So I feel you, Bruce. I feel you.
Absolutely. We all have each other, right? We're all into this together, reading. Yes. So thanks, everyone, for reading and listening. And until next time,
live long
and read on.
What do you call that, light reading? To each his own, number one.